Hello, dear friends, I am with you. Sofya Dorinskaya. I am a psychiatrist and the director of the Sofya Dorinskaya Medical Information Center. Today, I decided to record a video on how to take a person away from this community of fasting people, or from the fasting sect as I called it. Let's remember once again how a person can be or induce psychosis. So we have, let me show you, there is a source of psychosis, and we have a person. And this source of psychosis is a person who really spreads nonsense and delusions, as I have told you before. There's a man sitting on camera telling you that no matter how long you boil meat, there are still bacteria living in it, and you'll get poisoned. You'll die if you eat meat. You'll die if you eat butter, and so on. So there is a source of psychosis itself. In fact, a person who is in a state of psychosis, in the stage of convincing delusions, in a sluggish, ongoing psychosis. And there is a person onto whom he projects, in whom he potentiates this psychosis. What kind of person can be made to experience this psychosis? This person must be experiencing very intense pain. I'll put it this way. He must be experiencing very intense pain. But how exactly do you take a completely healthy and robust individual, someone who has absolutely no underlying medical conditions or illnesses, and cause them to start feeling intense pain? You would need to force him to endure extreme hunger and starvation, while systematically subjecting him to total physical exhaustion. When a person starts to starve, as I've already told you, the body will still get what it needs. That is, the body begins to destroy itself, the pain is disseminated, it's impossible to pinpoint, and it sublimates into emotions of horror, fear, aggression, and confusion. A person feels that something terrible awaits them ahead, they sense that something is wrong with their health, and so on. So, these are the kinds of people we're talking about. Pain is also experienced by people who have hypo or avitaminosis. These are people who go from doctor to doctor, and the doctors say, well, we can't find anything, maybe 1 or 2 red blood cells in the field of view, ha ha ha. But in reality, this is a severe stage of scurvy. That's how it manifests. So, this psychosis is imposed on a person. Their psychosis is intensified. And the person starts to wonder, what is going on? What should I do? And they begin to look for so-called like-minded people, and in this way they join various social groups. These groups can be on social networks, meaning they can be remote or they can be in person. In other words, these are gatherings of people who are obsessed with some idea. But before I tell you more, let's recall a certain principle of psychiatry that has been described, and which, like all things good and kind, has long been forgotten in psychiatry. So how exactly should a patient be kept in a psychiatric hospital? The problem, aside from all the others we have in psychiatry, such as poor treatment of patients, injecting them with psychoactive substances and so on, is that one of the real issues with keeping people in psychiatric hospitals is the very fact that they are placed there. And they start to induce complex psychological states in each other to exert a powerful influence over one another. That's how they gradually wind each other up into a frenzy. They start inducing delusions in each other, winding each other up with this shared psychosis and deeply entrenched delusional patterns of thinking. A person is already in a poor mental state, and on top of that, there are 25 other people who are hallucinating, wandering around at night, shouting, waving their arms, and displaying their mental confusion in every possible way. Confusion. So in the past, it was prescribed to keep such people in separate wards or rooms, however you want to call it. In other words, people were separated. People were not herded together, not into these large wards, the so-called acute wards, where they amplify each other. This psychosis, and they constantly wind each other up. Yes, because it's not for nothing that they say schizophrenia is contagious. What is schizophrenia? Is it contagious? Yes, because they wind each other up like little plates spinning, yes. Why do people often say that psychiatrists themselves are a bit mentally unstable? Yes, because it affects them too, yes. So then, how should people in psychosis actually be cared for properly? They need to be separated from each other. That is, each person should have their own separate room. Yes, they say the room should be padded. That's correct if the person is in an agitated state of insanity. But if the person is in a quiet state of insanity, they just need to sit in a calm environment, be given food there, and social interaction should be limited. Why aren't relatives allowed into psychiatric hospitals? Yes, because very often there is even such an observation among psychiatrists that the relatives of this unfortunate patient are more insane than the patient themselves. That is, within the family, they amplify each other, and it's just that one person, the one who starts to show some agitation or aggression, is the one who gets taken to the psychiatric hospital, but the rest are no better. That is precisely why there are restrictions on visits from relatives in psychiatric hospitals. Again, we're not going to discuss right now that this can lead to abuse and so on. I'm just explaining the essence of the process to you. So let's return to the situation where we have someone who is fond of fasting. Suddenly this person, he understood. Yes, exactly. Fasting will rid him of all life's troubles and so on and so forth. So what exactly does he do? He joins this particular social group, and the various members of this group start to reinforce each other's beliefs. They start to wind each other up into this psychosis. They communicate among themselves and so on and so forth. I think it's no secret to you about all these V-contactor groups, where a girl writes, "Oh, I slipped up, I ate a chicken drumstick." They tell her, "It's okay, you'll reach your goal, keep going, keep going." In other words, they just reinforce her, and instead of saying, "Hey, good for you, go eat another drumstick," they start winding each other up, and in this way, a person sinks deeper and deeper into the abyss of this psychosis. In fact, what I just described is the essence of any movement that wants to lure someone in. Actually, this is exactly how religious sects operate. As I've already told you, the essence of delusion can take different forms. Delusion can be like this, for example, with this person. It can be about food, it can be about religion, it can be about the end of the world, it can be about any completely unpredictable topic. It could be about that we need to weep over a cow's unfortunate fate, so for that reason you can't eat it. In other words, as they say, as long as people are alive, I think there are so many kinds of delusions that you couldn't even list them all. So what happens then? Here we have a person who absolutely must have this pain maintained. This is exactly what happens in those aggressive totalitarian religious sects. In fact, you will never see people who are well fed or people who are allowed to physically rest. So if you find yourself in such a situation, what should you do? You need to remember this image, how people are kept in a psychiatric hospital, and realize one simple thing. Even if your daughter physically lives with you in the house, sits at the same table with you, and walks with you on the same floorboards, yes, in her mind, in her head. She's actually in that very acute ward of a psychiatric hospital. Her mind is there. You see her body, but her mind is over there. What do you need to do? You need to, by any means, start separating her. Separate this person from that community. This also applies to those religious sects, yes, with their delusional ideas. In other words, by any means, separate this person from communication within that psychotic community. That's the first thing. The most important task is to feed her. Seriously, whatever it takes. When this girl comes, the fridge should be packed with all sorts of tasty, nutritious food. When you sit down at the table and she says, "Mom, I'm dieting," it doesn't matter. You fill the table with food. Because after all, nature and biology are such that if the body is hungry and looks at food, saliva will still be produced and gastric juice will still be secreted. And still, when this person starts to eat, you must feed them, and definitely 3 times. 1, 2, 3. You must also make sure this person gets rest. What does that mean? It simply means physically not letting the person get enough sleep, to actually let them rest physically. And these are the 3 points. You must do everything you can to eliminate this artificially created pain. Yes, if the fasting has already led to the point where the person is physically in pain, you need to see a doctor. If, roughly speaking, something in the body has already broken, you won't be able to fix it just like that. You need to go to a doctor for an examination and real treatment. but you must provide them with proper nourishment and food. You must ensure they receive adequate and restorative sleep. And you must take every conceivable measure and action to remove them, to isolate them in a completely separate and private living space, so to speak, in order to fully separate them from this toxic and psychotic community. How can this be done? If the person is an adult, you simply need to take them away with the family to some other place, leaving absolutely all means of communication at home. Absolutely everything, no phones at all. No internet either, so that no one from this community can reach them. Only the immediate family members truly know, and only the family itself effectively controls this person. If you happen to have a minor child, my dear friends and listeners, when you complain that your underage child simply won't put down their mobile phone or digital tablet, I always find myself having a very specific question to ask you. Give me the address of this wonderful place, where children are given phones or tablets for free. So my friends, just don't buy your child one. Phones that can easily access the internet like this, and tablets. If someone needs to stay in touch, there are the most basic phone handsets that cost less than 1,000 rubles and won't affect your budget at all. And there you go, that's your connection. So, you must do everything you can to break off this person's communication with that psychotic community. I can tell you a story. This happened in Kazakhstan, and there was a girl. She was smart, she knew several languages, and she left. She physically joined this religious sect, a rather strict one, and she went to America. The mother realized what was happening only after her daughter was already in America, and the mother started telling her, "No, come back, I don't agree with you being there." But it wasn't that simple. Naturally, this psychotic environment that the girl had already ended up in, she was already there, yes. So, in Kazakhstan, adulthood starts at 18, but in America, it's at 21, and that's what saved the situation. So this girl, naturally, these curators in that group in America were keeping an eye on her, and she stopped communicating with her mother. She told her mother, "I don't recognize you," and said all sorts of nasty things to her, I have to say. And naturally, her mother was completely beside herself. Her mother filed a report with the Kazakh special services and all the embassies. And they started to get the girl out through the Kazakh ambassadors in America, and the special services got involved. It was helpful that there is a difference in the age of majority between America and Kazakhstan, and the girl had not yet reached that age. She was not of legal age according to American law, and they were forced to deport her from America to the border, since a case had already been opened, meaning the special services, the KNB, the Kazakh National Security Committee, had opened this case. The girl had her passport taken away, so she couldn't leave the country. And what did they do? They simply locked the girl up at home, deprived her of all means of communication, so only the family was there. Well, in the East, these families are very strong. The girl ate, the girl slept, the girl ate, the girl slept, the girl stayed at home, relatives would come to visit her, her mother talked to her grandmother talked to her father talked to her, and so on and so on. And this went on for some time. Maybe she stayed there for a month, maybe a month and a half she stayed there. And gradually, you see, here's the thing. When psychosis is induced, that is, when a person is put into that state, generally, the person is normal, reasonable, and when you cut them off from the source of the psychosis, first of all, and secondly, when you remove the basis for the psychosis, the pain, then after some time, the psychosis in the person begins to weaken. It simply fades away on its own. And this girl suddenly saw her mother, suddenly she saw her family, suddenly she came to her senses. And now, thank God, everything has worked out for them. She was reinstated at the institute, she is studying, and so to speak, she no longer even remembers that situation at all. So here's another point regarding various psychoactive substances. The same goes for neuroleptics. Let me tell you another story. Back on February 26th in the year 2015, we officially established the solemn day of remembrance for victims of psychiatry, in honor and memory of a young girl who suffered, Katya Kovaleva, who died in psychiatric confinement. That's right, February 26th, 2015. What is this story about? This girl was 16 years old at the time of her death. And 3 years before that, when she was 13, she was a chubby, completely normal girl. 3 years before that, she decided to lose weight. And through these hunger strikes, she brought herself to the point of hallucinosis. She started having abdominal pains and developed hallucinosis. The girl was hospitalized, but as soon as the doctors heard that she was having hallucinations, they stopped treating her and sent her to a psychiatric hospital. Over the course of 3 years, the girl went through several hospitalizations. She was constantly on these neuroleptics. Naturally, from the neuroleptics, she became bloated and she started to lactate, meaning her prolactin hormone levels were off the charts. And seeing her situation, this girl decided to end her life. When they revived her without further thought, they sent her to the Solodovnikov Psychiatric Hospital in Omsk. And there, then things got even worse for her. Her mother would go to the attending doctor and say that her daughter was telling her she felt very bad from the pills. The doctor said that the girl was faking it so she wouldn't have to take the pills. Then, during the night, she got worse and started suffocating. Her roommates called the nurse, but the nurse ignored it, and in the morning the girl was found already cold. That was on February 26th, 2015. Katya Kovaleva died, and on February 26th. So, as a human rights community, we established the Day of Remembrance for Victims of Psychiatry, simply as a reminder that people can die in psychiatric institutions. So, I can tell you this, the overwhelming majority of situations, even those involving psychosis, can be resolved without neuroleptics. They can be resolved. If the psychiatrist is competent, if they know the causes of psychosis and are able to address these problems. By the way, this girl in Kazakhstan naturally was not given any neuroleptics. God forbid, nothing at all. She simply stayed at home, ate, slept, and was in this kind of informational isolation. This very principle can be used if your relative ends up in some other kind of psychotic community where there is a source where psychosis is induced. You just need to understand that the person either ends up there or deliberately seeks out a community of people with this same psychotic mindset. And they start to amplify each other, and they themselves become sources of psychosis for one another. And a small remark at the end. I understand that when your relative ends up in such a situation, your reaction as a normal person is quite natural. You immediately start to pressure this relative, telling them how wrong they are. How could they do this? Look, watch Dorinskaya's video. Look here, realize this, realize that. My friends, you won't achieve anything, at least not at first, until your relative has had enough to eat, has gotten some sleep, and until you occasionally, even if only briefly, take them out of that crazy environment. What should you do? You should. So here's why it won't work. I also want to say, if you know that video with the guy sitting there with the meat, just imagine yourself going up to that guy and trying to prove to him that he's wrong. You will never in your life out-argue him with logic, a well-structured, well-constructed delusion. Never. You will never win there with logic. You give him an argument, he throws 15 words back at you. Some completely random statements that this person presents as facts, and you'll be totally lost, and he'll even gloat like, ha ha ha, I got you. He'll say he made you look foolish, that he pinned you down in the argument. That's why it's pointless to say anything here. You should just gently talk about nothing, or better yet, talk as little as possible. You should just serve this person food. Stroke his hand gently with a soft, kind voice and say, go get some sleep, go rest. You've worked so much, you must be so tired. Have you eaten? Do you want anything else? Go get some sleep, go on. Oh, I need to lose weight. Oh, well, you can lose weight tomorrow. All right, great, go get some sleep. If you've eaten, that's good. What else would you like? This is a kind of fish, it's healthy. You won't gain any weight from it at all. This is a kind of meat, it's healthy. I don't know, this is some crust, this is some butter, this is a little salad, anything you want. You see, you shouldn't. When a person is in such an intensely aggravated and highly acute emotional state, you will find that you can never get any logical or reasonable concept or idea across to them. You can only begin to talk to them a little bit more reasonably once you clearly see that they are finally starting to settle down and regain their composure, and even then it is vital that you do not push them too hard. You should never resort to yelling at another person, because this kind of unpleasant interaction, especially when someone is being attacked, shouted at, or heavily pressured, is inherently off-putting in itself and naturally pushes people away. That's the kind of manner it is. Even if you have good intentions, even if your thoughts are wonderful, even if your actions actually help preserve this person's life and health, it's just that outwardly it looks like the friends are here and the enemies are at home. Moreover, the idea that you are the enemies is already supported by a very powerful delusional foundation. Why don't these girls eat? Why don't they listen to their mother? There is already a very powerful delusional foundation built there, because once again, people who are truly insane think it all through like that. It's not. They find confirmation for their idiocy from some deep, obscure places that you would never even guess exist in real life. Everything is set up. I hope this video was clear. If you have any specific questions, feel free to ask. I'll help however I can. And again, I want to say the foundation of health, the absence of pain, and that is nutrition, a balance of work and rest, and a certain hygiene in your own communication. I hope this video was clear and useful for you. This was Sofya Dorinskaya with you. All the best. Goodbye.